The smell of old paper and pretension. That is what the lecture hall smelled like. It was a massive amphitheater-style room at Cambridge University, filled with 300 of the brightest minds in the world. And standing at the bottom of the pit, like a god judging mortals, was Professor Alistair Hawthorne. He was a man who wore tweed suits that cost more than my tuition, and he spoke with an accent so posh it made you feel poor just listening to it. He was the head of the advanced economics department. He was a genius, and he was also the most classist, arrogant man I had ever met. I sat in the third row, clutching my final thesis. I had spent 6 months on it. I had barely slept. I had poured every ounce of my soul into analyzing global market trends and microeconomic stability. I knew it was perfect. I knew it was A-grade material. But as Hawthorne walked up the stairs, handing back the graded papers, I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. He stopped at my desk. He didn't hand me my paper. He dropped it. It landed with a heavy thud. I looked down. There was no grade, just a single red line slashed across the cover page, and a note scrawled in red ink. "See me after class." I waited. The other students filed out, chattering about their grades, complaining about B+s. I sat in silence. When the room was finally empty, Hawthorne walked back to his podium. He didn't look at me. He started wiping the chalkboard. "Miss Sterling," he said, his back turned to me, "do you know why I asked you to stay?" I stood up. My legs felt weak. "No, Professor. Is there something wrong with my thesis? Did I cite a source incorrectly?" He turned around. He dusted the chalk off his hands. He looked at me with a look of pure pity. "The thesis is fine, academically speaking. The math checks out. The theory is sound. But I cannot in good conscience accept it." I blinked. "I don't understand. If the work is good, why can't you accept it?" "Because, Miss Sterling," he said, walking slowly up the steps toward me, "I saw you last night." My heart skipped a beat. "You saw me?" "Yes. I was dining at the Rusty Spoon, a dreadful little diner downtown, and I saw you. You were wearing a stained apron. You were carrying a tray of greasy burgers. You were serving coffee to truck drivers." I felt my face burn. "Yes, Professor, I work there. I work the night shift to pay for my books." He chuckled. A cold, dry sound. "To pay for your books? How quaint. Look, Miss Sterling, let me be frank. This is Cambridge. This is an institution for the elite, for the future leaders of the world. It requires focus. It requires dignity. It requires a certain pedigree." He picked up my paper from the desk and held it like it was contaminated. "You cannot be a serious economist if you are worried about tips and ketchup stains. It splits the focus. It degrades the mind. A waitress does not belong in my advanced seminar. A waitress belongs in the kitchen." I stared at him. The air left my lungs. He wasn't failing me because I was wrong. He was failing me because I was working. "Professor," I said, my voice shaking, "my financial situation has nothing to do with my intellect. I scored the highest in the midterm. He cut me off. "You are distracted," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "You are tired. I see the bags under your eyes. You are trying to exist in two worlds, and you are failing at both. I am doing you a favor. I am failing you so you can drop out and pursue a career more suited to your station. Perhaps management at that diner?" He ripped my thesis in half. Then he ripped it again. He dropped the pieces on the floor. "Class dismissed, Miss Sterling. Don't bother registering for next semester. I have already spoken to the dean. Your scholarship is under review. We don't waste funding on part-time students." I stood there for a long time. I looked at the torn paper on the floor. I looked at his smug, satisfied face. He thought he had broken me. He thought he had crushed the poor scholarship girl. I bent down. I picked up the pieces of my work. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just looked at him. "You're making a mistake, Professor," I said quietly. He laughed. "I don't make mistakes, my dear. I correct them. Now, run along. The lunch rush starts soon, doesn't it? Don't want to be late for your shift. I walked out of the lecture hall. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. He was right about one thing. I was living in two worlds, but he was wrong about which one was real. I walked across the campus. It was raining. I pulled my hood up. I walked past the library. I walked past the dorms. I walked all the way to the edge of town to a small, run-down parking lot behind the Rusty Spoon Diner. I didn't go inside to clock in. I walked to a blacked-out SUV parked in the shadows. The driver, a man named Silas, who used to be Special Forces, stepped out and opened the back door. "Good afternoon, Miss Sterling," he said. "How was class?" "It was enlightening, Silas," I said, sliding into the leather seat. I pulled out my phone. It wasn't the cracked iPhone 7 I used in front of the professor. It was an encrypted satellite phone. I dialed a number. It rang once. "Arthur," I said. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Arthur was the head of the Sterling Family Trust. The trust my grandfather built, the trust that controlled billions of dollars in assets, including pharmaceutical companies, tech giants, and educational endowments. "I need you to pull the file on the Hawthorne research grant," I said, watching the rain hit the window. Arthur said. "The $50 million grant for the new economics wing at Cambridge? The one we have been anonymously funding for 5 years?" "That's the one," I said. "Who is the lead beneficiary?" "Professor Alistair Hawthorne," Arthur replied. "It funds his salary, his research team, his travel, and that ridiculous office renovation he requested last month." "Why do you ask?" "Because," I said, looking at the torn thesis in my lap, "Professor Hawthorne just failed me. He told me that a waitress doesn't belong in his department. He tore up my work and threatened to revoke my scholarship." There was a long silence on the line, the kind of silence that happens before an explosion. "He did what?" Arthur whispered. "He thinks I'm poor, Arthur. He thinks I'm a charity case. He doesn't know that the charity he lives on comes from my pocket." "What are your instructions, Madam Chairwoman?" Arthur asked. His voice had shifted. He was ready for war. "Do you want me to pull the funding?" I thought about it. Pulling the funding was too easy. It would just end his project. I didn't want to just end it. I wanted to destroy his ego. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation he just made me feel. "No," I said. "Don't pull the money yet. I want to double it." Arthur paused. "Double it?" "Yes," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. "Send a notification to the university board. Tell them the anonymous donor is coming for a site visit. Tell them the donor wants to personally inspect the progress of the Hawthorne lab before releasing the next tranche of $100 million. Understood," Arthur said. "When should we schedule the visit?" "Tomorrow," I said, at 9 a.m. during his lecture. "And Arthur?" "Yes?" "Make sure the board knows that the donor expects a full presentation from Professor Hawthorne. Tell them the donor is very particular about excellence." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "And Miss Sterling?" "Yes?" "Should I send the Rolls-Royce, or will you be taking the bicycle?" I laughed. It was a dark, dangerous sound. "Send the Rolls, Arthur, and bring the entire legal team. I'm done serving coffee. It's time to serve some justice." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in the seat. Silas looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Rate, where to, Miss Sterling? The diner?" "No, Silas," I said. "Take me to the mall. I need a new outfit. Something that says I own you. And then take me to the salon. I need to wash the waitress out of my hair." Professor Hawthorne wanted a pedigree. He was about to get a dynasty. Jeering. He wanted to teach me a lesson about station. We want to teach him that you should never, ever judge a student by her apron, because underneath that apron might be the person who signed your paycheck. Do you want to see the moment I walk into that lecture hall, not as a student, but as the billionaire donor, and watch Hawthorne's face melt when he realizes who I really am? You need to subscribe right now. The lesson is just beginning. The next morning, the sun rose over Cambridge, but I didn't wake up in my cramped dorm room. I woke up in the master suite of the Grand Hotel. The thread count on the sheets was higher than my bank balance used to be, or at least what people thought my bank balance was. I stood in front of the full-length mirror. The girl who stared back at me wasn't the tired waitress with messy hair and ketchup stains on her apron. That girl was gone. In her place stood Ava Sterling. I was wearing a bespoke cream-colored power suit from Chanel, tailored to fit like a second skin. My hair was blown out in sleek, glossy waves. On my wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch worth more than the entire economics department's annual budget. And on my feet were red-bottomed heels that clicked with the authority of a judge's gavel. I didn't bring a backpack. I carried a Hermes Birkin bag. Inside, there were no textbooks, just a single iPad and a legal document that could end a career in 5 seconds. My phone buzzed. It was Silas, my driver. "The convoy is ready, Miss Sterling. We are 2 minutes out." I walked out of the hotel suite. My security team, 4 men in black suits with earpieces, fell in step behind me. We moved like a phalanx. We moved like power. We arrived at the university gates at 8:55 a.m. Usually, I rode a rusty bicycle to class, dodging puddles and praying the chain wouldn't fall off. Today, I was in the back of a phantom Rolls-Royce, flanked by 2 black SUVs. The campus security guard, a man named George who had once yelled at me for locking my bike to a railing, stepped out of his booth. He looked at the convoy, his jaw dropped. He didn't ask for ID. He opened the main gate, the one usually reserved for royalty and visiting heads of state. We rolled onto the main quad. Students stopped walking. They pulled out their phones. They whispered, "Who is that? Is it a movie star? Is it the Queen?" Cars stopped right in front of the economics building. Standing on the steps was a welcoming committee. The dean of the university, Dean Whitaker, was there. He was sweating, despite the cool morning air. Beside him were the department heads, looking nervous. They were expecting the anonymous donor. They were expecting an old man with a cane. They were expecting to kiss the ring. Silas opened my door. I stepped out. The camera flashes went off immediately. I raised my sunglasses. I didn't look at the students. I looked straight at the dean. Dean Whitaker stepped forward, confused. He looked around, trying to spot the real donor inside the car. When he realized I was the only one stepping out, his smile faltered. "Miss? Miss? Are you the assistant? Is the donor still in the vehicle?" I took off my sunglasses. "Hello, Dean Whitaker. I am not the assistant. I am the trust." The dean blinked. He looked at my face. He recognized me, but he couldn't place me. I was a ghost from a classroom he rarely visited. "Miss Sterling?" he stammered. "But you're a student. I believe I have a file on my desk. Professor Hawthorne mentioned you were expelled?" I finished his sentence. "Yes, that's what we are here to discuss. Shall we go inside? The presentation starts in 5 minutes, and I hate being late." I walked past him. I didn't wait for permission. I walked into the building like I owned it because technically, I paid for the roof over their heads. The dean and his entourage scrambled to catch up. "Miss Sterling, please, this is highly irregular. We were expecting someone older." "Money doesn't have an age, Dean," I said, my heels echoing on the marble floor. "It only has a voice. And right now, my voice is telling you to take me to Lecture Hall B." We reached the double doors of the lecture hall. Inside, I could hear Professor Hawthorne's voice. He was pontificating. He was in his element. I turned to the dean. "Do not announce me," I said. "I want to slip in. I want to see the great professor in his natural habitat before we begin the official review." The dean nodded, terrified. "Of course. Of course." I signaled Silas to open the door quietly. I slipped inside. The dean followed, along with my security team who lined the back wall. The room was packed. 300 students. the same students who had watched me get humiliated yesterday. Hawthorne was on stage. He was pointing at a graph on the massive screen. "As you can see," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance, "the market rewards efficiency. It punishes the weak. It weeds out those who lack the capital, both intellectual and financial, to survive. It is a natural selection. The poor stay poor because they lack the discipline to ascend." He paused for effect. He looked around the room. "Take yesterday, for example. We had a student, let's call her Miss S. She attempted to present a thesis while smelling of grease and failure. I removed her. Not to be cruel, but to protect the sanctity of this institution. You cannot mix gold with gravel and expect jewelry. You just get dirty gold." The class laughed. A cruel, sycophantic laugh. They were laughing at me. I felt the anger rise, but I pushed it down. I turned it into fuel. I stepped out from the shadows of the back wall. I started walking down the center aisle. Click, click, click. The sound of my heels cut through the laughter. Heads turned. The laughter died. Students gasped. They saw the Chanel suit. They saw the posture. They saw the vibe. "Is that Clara?" someone whispered. "No way," someone else said. "Look at her shoes." Hawthorne heard the commotion. He turned around. He squinted against the stage lights. He saw a woman walking toward him, a woman who looked like a CEO. But as I got closer, he recognized the face. His expression shifted from confusion to outrage. "You!" he barked, pointing a chalk-covered finger at me. "Miss Sterling! I thought I made myself clear yesterday. You are expelled. You are trespassing." I mute think. I didn't stop walking. I kept coming, right up to the edge of the stage. I stopped. I looked up at him. "Good morning, Professor," I said smoothly. "I enjoyed your analogy about gold and gravel. Very poetic." "Get out!" he screamed. "Security! Where is campus security? I want this waitress removed from my lecture hall immediately. She is disrupting the learning environment." He looked up at the back of the room, waving his arms. "Dean Whitaker!" he yelled, spotting the dean. "Thank God you are here. This student is harassing me. She refuses to accept her expulsion. Please, have her arrested." The room was deadly silent. Everyone looked at the dean. Dean Whitaker walked down the aisle. He looked pale. He looked like he was walking to his own execution. He stopped next to me. He didn't look at Hawthorne. He looked at the floor. "Professor Hawthorne," the dean said, his voice shaking, "please lower your voice." "Lower my voice?" Hawthorne sputtered. "She is trespassing. She is a distraction. She is a nobody." The dean closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. "Professor," he said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up, "this is not a nobody. This is Ms. Ava Sterling." "So?" Hawthorne scoffed. "I know her name. She scrubs tables at the Rusty Spoon." The dean turned to Hawthorne. "No, Alistair, you don't understand. Miss Sterling is the chairwoman of the Sterling Family Trust." Hawthorne froze. "The trust?" "Yes," the dean continued, sweating profusely. "The trust that donated $50 million for this wing. The trust that pays for your research. The trust that pays your salary." "See," the dean gestured to me. "Professor Hawthorne, meet your boss." The silence that followed was heavy. It was suffocating. Hawthorne looked at the dean. Then he looked at me. His face went through 5 stages of grief in 5 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But he was stuck on denial. That's impossible," he whispered. "She's a waitress. I saw her. She was serving burgers." I smiled. It was the smile of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. I stepped onto the stage. I walked up to the podium. Hawthorne backed away from me like I was radioactive. I leaned into the microphone. "I do work at the diner, Professor. I said, my voice booming through the speakers. I work there because I wanted to understand the economics of the working class from the ground up. I wanted to see how real people live, struggle, and survive in the economy you talk about so abstractly. It's called field research. Perhaps if you left your ivory tower once in a while, you would know the difference between gravel and character. I looked out at the stunned students. But you were right about one thing, Professor. The market does punish the inefficient. And right now, I'm looking at a very inefficient investment. I turned to Hawthorne. He was trembling. I am here for the site visit, Alistair. I want to see exactly where my $50 million went. And judging by the torn paper on the floor from yesterday, I'm not impressed so far. You have 10 minutes to prepare your presentation. I sat down in his chair on the stage. I crossed my legs. Don't bore me.
His spell means arrogance.
Crumble into absolute panic as he tries to justify his existence to the girl he just called trash. Keep watching. Section 3 is going to be a masterclass in humiliation. 10 minutes is a long time when you are waiting for a bus, but it is a terrifyingly short amount of time when you are trying to justify 20 years of mediocrity to the person who holds your checkbook. Professor Hawthorne spent those 10 minutes sweating. He was frantic. He was yelling at his teaching assistants to find files. He was fumbling with the projector remote. He dropped his laser pointer twice. I sat in his leather chair on the stage, watching him with calm indifference. I pulled a file from my Hermes bag. It wasn't my thesis. It was the audit report my lawyers had compiled overnight. It was thick, it was heavy, and it was damning. The dean stood in the corner, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. The students sat frozen in their seats. Nobody checked their phones. Nobody whispered. This was better than Netflix. This was a live execution of a career. Time's up, Alistair, I said, checking my Patek Philippe. Impress me. Hawthorne stood at the podium. His tie was crooked. His usual arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a slump of defeat. Right, he stammered. Yes. Thank you, Miss Sterling. Madam Chairwoman. I have prepared a brief overview of our current research into macroeconomic stability in developing nations. He clicked the first slide. It was a mess of graphs and pie charts. As you can see, he began, his voice cracking, our data suggests that the liquidity crisis is driven primarily by external market forces. I didn't let him finish. Stop, I said. He froze. Stop? Go back to the previous slide, I commanded. He clicked back. I stood up and walked over to the screen. I pointed at a graph showing inflation rates. This data, I said, looking at the class. Does anyone notice the anomaly? Silence. Professor? I asked Hawthorne. Do you see it? He squinted at his own work. It looks standard. The trend line is upward. It's fabricated, I said coldly. I turned to the students. Look at the x-axis. The data points are perfectly linear. In real economics, markets are volatile. They fluctuate. A perfect line like this doesn't exist in nature. It only exists when someone is lazy and plugs random numbers into an Excel spreadsheet to make a result look good. I turned back to Hawthorne. You didn't do the research, Alistair. You guessed. You took my $50 million, hired a few undergrads to make pretty pictures, and hoped nobody would check the math. That's preposterous, Hawthorne shouted, trying to regain some ground. I have a PhD. I'm a published author. You are a 20-year-old student. What do you know about data modeling? I smiled. I walked over to the chalkboard, the same chalkboard he had used to mock me yesterday. I picked up a piece of chalk. Solve this, I said, writing a complex differential equation on the board. It was the Black-Scholes model, but with a variable for high-frequency trading risk. It was difficult. It was something only a true expert could solve on the fly. Hawthorne stared at the board. He blinked. He started to sweat even more. I don't need to perform parlor tricks for you, he scoffed. This is beneath me. It's not beneath you, Alistair, I said. It's beyond you. You can't solve it because you haven't done real math in 10 years. You've been coasting on your tenure and your reputation. I turned to the class. Is there anyone here who can solve this? Anyone who wants to prove that they belong in this room more than the professor? A hand went up in the back row. It was a quiet boy named David. He was on a scholarship too. Hawthorne ignored him all semester. "Come down here, David," I said. David ran down the stairs. He grabbed the chalk. He solved the equation in 30 seconds. "Correct," I said. I looked at Hawthorne. "A 19-year-old just outsmarted you, and you wanted to fail me?" Hawthorne was breathing heavy now. He looked like a cornered animal. "Fine. So the research is lagging. Research takes time. But the funding is being used for vital infrastructure, the new lab equipment, the software." "Ah, yes," I said, picking up the heavy file from the desk. "The infrastructure. Let's talk about that." I opened the file. Page 4, I read aloud. Expense report, October. Item 1, ergonomic office upgrade. Cost, $45,000. I looked around the room. I walked over to his desk. I tapped the marble surface. "Is this Italian marble vital for economic research, Alistair? Does the smoothness of the stone help you calculate inflation better?" I turned the page. Item 2, International Conference on Global Trade. Location, the Maldives. Hotel, the Four Seasons Private Villa. Cost for 1 week, $80,000. I looked at him. The Maldives? Really? I didn't know the global economy was centered on a beach resort. Did you give a lecture to the dolphins? The students started giggling. The dean looked like he was about to faint. "That was networking," Hawthorne squeaked. "Important stakeholders were there." I slammed the file shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You are a fraud, Alistair. You took money meant for education and spent it on your ego. You failed students who actually worked hard, students like me, students like David, because we reminded you of your own inadequacy. You hated me because I was a waitress? No, you hated me because you knew that even with an apron on, I was smarter than you." I turned to the dean. "Dean Whitaker, I am hereby freezing all assets from the Sterling Trust. Not a single penny moves until this department is purged." The dean nodded frantically. "Understood, Miss Sterling. We will launch an immediate investigation." "I'm not done," I said. I looked at Hawthorne. "You told me yesterday that I belong in the kitchen, that I should stick to serving coffee." I walked over to the side table where a pitcher of water and some glasses were sitting for the lecturer. I poured a glass of water. I held it out. "I'm thirsty, Professor." He stared at me. "What?" "Bring me the water," I said. My voice was low. "Dangerous. You like hierarchy, don't you? You like knowing your place. Well, right now, I am the capital, and you are the labor. Bring me the water." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Hawthorne looked at the dean. The dean looked away. He looked at the students. They were filming on their phones. Slowly, painfully, Hawthorne walked over to the table. His hands were shaking so bad, the water sloshed over the rim. He picked up the glass. He walked over to me. He held it out. "Thank you, Alistair," I said. I took the glass. I didn't drink it. I placed it gently on the podium. "See? It's not so hard to serve others. It's honest work. Much more honest than what you've been doing for the last 5 years." I turned to the class. "You are all dismissed. Class is over, permanently, because I am defunding this specific course effective immediately. But don't worry, I'm launching a new program next semester. It will be led by visiting experts who actually work in the field. And guess what?" I looked at David. "Scholarships for everyone with a GPA over 3.5. Paid for by the money I'm about to recover from Alistair's bank account." The students cheered. They jumped up. It was chaos. Hawthorne stood there, broken. humiliated, holding onto the podium like it was a life raft. I grabbed my bag. I started to walk away. "Miss Sterling," Hawthorne cried out, "wait! My tenure! You can't do this! I have tenure!" I stopped at the door. I put my sunglasses back on. "I bought the building, Alistair. Tenure protects you from the university. It doesn't protect you from the landlord." I turned to my security guard. "Silas?" "Yes, Miss Sterling." "Escort the gentleman out." "And Silas?" "Yes." "Make sure he doesn't take the marble desk. It belongs to me." I walked out of the lecture hall. The applause from the students followed me down the hallway. I felt lighter. The anger was gone. But the war wasn't over. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Arthur. "Madam Chairwoman, we have a problem." "What now, Arthur?" I asked, sliding into the Rolls-Royce. "It's the university chancellor," he said. "He just saw the live stream of what you did. He is furious. He says you humiliated the institution. He is calling an emergency board meeting to revoke your degree and ban the Sterling Trust from campus. He says he won't be bullied by a 20-year-old. I laughed. "The chancellor wants to play?" "Arthur, turn the car around. We're not going to the hotel." "Where are we going?" Arthur asked. "We're going to the chancellor's mansion." I think it's time I introduced him to the concept of a hostile takeover. If you want to see me take on the head of the university and uncover a scandal that goes all the way to the government, hit that subscribe button. Professor Hawthorne was just the appetizer. The chancellor is the main course. The chancellor's mansion sat on a hill overlooking the campus. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress of stone and ivy, built 300 years ago to house the most powerful men in academia. Chancellor Lord Benedict didn't just run the university, he ruled it like a fiefdom. He was a man with a title, a seat in the House of Lords, and an ego the size of the British Empire. As the Rolls-Royce climbed the winding driveway, I looked at the file Arthur had digitally transferred to my iPad. If Professor Hawthorne was a petty thief, Chancellor Benedict was a criminal mastermind. Hawthorne stole thousands. Benedict was stealing millions. According to the forensic accounting, the University Endowment Fund, which my family contributed to heavily, was bleeding money. Consulting fees, offshore investments, administrative bonuses. It was a classic laundering scheme hidden behind the prestige of a world-class education. We pulled up to the heavy oak doors. Security was tight. 2 guards with earpieces stepped forward. Fregnam fortsatt cabinet from Mackinimid the group is high grade and high garduiho until you cooperate chained. "I have an appointment with Lord Benedict," I said. The guard checked his clipboard. "I don't see a name here, miss. The chancellor is in a private meeting. No visitors." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just held up my phone. I dialed the chancellor's private number, the one Arthur had obtained from the dark web. I watched through the window as the guard's radio crackled. Ways inside the house, a phone rang. 10 seconds later, the front door opened. Lord Benedict stood there. He was 60, wearing a velvet smoking jacket and holding a glass of scotch. He looked furious. He waved at the guards to let us through. I stepped out of the car. I told Silas to wait. I walked up the stone steps alone. Benedict didn't invite me in. He blocked the doorway. "You have a lot of nerve coming here, Miss Sterling," he spat. "The audacity. You march into my university, disrupt a lecture, humiliate a tenured professor, and think you can just drive up to my house?" I walked past him. I literally brushed past his shoulder and walked into his foyer. It smelled of expensive cigars and old money. "Think we need to talk, Benedict. Inside. Unless you want the guards to hear about the Cayman Island accounts." He froze. The door clicked shut behind him. The color drained from his face. He turned around slowly. "What did you say?" I walked into his library. It was lined with first edition books that probably cost more than my tuition. I sat down in a leather armchair uninvited.
I said, let's talk about the Caymans and the admission scandal. and the construction kickbacks.
Cross my legs.
Nice house, by the way. Does the university pay for the heating, or does that come from the student welfare fund? Benedict walked into the room. He set his scotch down on the mantelpiece. His hands were trembling slightly, but he tried to hide it. "You are playing a dangerous game, little girl," he warned. "I am not Hawthorne. You can't bully me with a donation check. I have friends in Parliament. I have friends in the press. I can destroy your reputation before you even leave this room. I will have you blacklisted. No university will ever accept you. You will be a pariah." I laughed. "Blacklisted? Benedict, I don't need a degree to be successful. I already run a conglomerate. I came to this school for knowledge, not a piece of paper. But you? You need this job. You need the prestige. Without it, you're just a broke aristocrat with a crumbling castle." I picked up a crystal paperweight from his desk. I examined it. "Here is the situation," I said. "I know about Project Gatekeeper." Benedict flinched. Project Gatekeeper was the code name for his scheme, selling admission seats to the children of foreign oligarchs who couldn't pass the entrance exams. $500,000 per seat, cash, funneled through a shell company in Zurich. "I don't know what you are talking about," he lied. I pulled out my iPad. I swiped the screen and turned it toward him. It showed a bank transfer. Sender, Petrochemical Holdings meant for research grant. Recipient, Benedict Consulting Group. Amount, $2 million. I looked at him. "This transfer happened last week, Benedict. The same week the son of a Russian oil tycoon was admitted to the engineering program despite having failing grades. Coincidence?" Benedict collapsed onto the sofa. The fight went out of him. He realized he wasn't dealing with a student. He was dealing with a corporate raider. "Or, what do you want?" he whispered. "Money? I can give you a cut. We can work something out." I stood up. I walked over to the fireplace. "I don't want your dirty money, Benedict. I have enough of my own." "I want your resignation." He looked up. "Resignation? I can't resign. I am the chancellor. I am a life peer. It would be a scandal." "Oh, the scandal is coming regardless," I said. "The only choice you have is how it arrives. Option A, you resign immediately. You cite health reasons. You retire to your country estate and never step foot in academia again. Option B, I send this file to the Serious Fraud Office, the BBC, and the parents of every student who got rejected because you sold their spot to the highest bidder. You go to prison. You lose the title. You lose the house." I looked at the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. "You have 5 minutes to decide." Benedict stared at the fire. He poured himself another drink. He downed it in one gulp. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You are a monster," he said. "No," I corrected. "I'm a cleaner. And this university is filthy." I pulled a document from my bag. It was a pre-written resignation letter. Arthur was efficient like that. "Sign it." He took the pen. His hand shook. He signed Lord Alistair Benedict. He threw the pen into the fire. "Now get out," he snarled. I picked up the letter. Gladly. "Oh, and one more thing." I stopped at the door. "The new chancellor? I've already selected him." "Warlord? Who?" Benedict asked. "Who could possibly replace me?" "Dr. Heiress," I said. Benedict laughed. "Heiress? The librarian? The man is a nobody. He has no connections. He drives a Honda." "Exactly," I smiled. "He's honest. He cares about books, not bribes. And he was the only faculty member who was kind to me when I was scrubbing floors at the diner. He tipped me £5 on a £3 coffee. That investment just paid off." I walked out of the mansion. The sun was setting. I got back into the Rolls-Royce. Silas looked at me. "How did it go, Miss Sterling?" "It went well, Silas. Drive to the library. I have a job offer to make." We drove down the hill. But as we entered the main town, I saw flashing lights, police cars, lots of them. They weren't heading to the chancellor's house. They were blocking the road to the diner. The Rusty Spoon. "Silas, stop," I said. I looked out the window. Yellow tape was wrapped around the diner. A crowd had gathered. I opened the door and ran toward the scene. A police officer stopped me. "Back! Stay back, miss! This is a crime scene." "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I work here! Where is the owner? Where is Old Joe?" Old Joe was the man who gave me a job when nobody else would. He was like a grandfather to me. The officer looked at me. He saw the expensive suit, but he saw the panic in my eyes. "There was a fire, miss. Arson. About 20 minutes ago, the place was firebombed." "Firebombed?" I gasped. "Was anyone inside?" "The owner," the officer said grimly. "Joe. He was in the back office counting the till. The paramedics took him, but it doesn't look good." I felt the ground sway beneath my feet. This wasn't an accident. 20 minutes ago? That was right after I left Hawthorne, right before I confronted Benedict. My phone buzzed. The unknown number. I answered it. "Hello, Miss Sterling," a voice said. It was distorted. Mechanical. "You think you can come into our town and break our rules? You think you can fire our friends and threaten our operation?" "Who is this?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the phone. "We are the ones who really run this city," the voice said. "Benedict was just a puppet. Hawthorne was a distraction. You poked the hornet's nest, little girl. The diner was a warning. Leave town. Drop the investigation, or the next fire won't be at a restaurant, it will be at your hotel." The line went dead. I stood there in the rain, looking at the burning remains of the only place that had felt like home. I looked at the ambulance speeding away with Joe inside. They thought they could scare me. They thought burning down a diner would make me run. They made a fatal calculation error. They didn't subtract my fear. They added to my rage. I walked back to the Rolls-Royce. I was soaking wet. My Chanel suit was ruined. I didn't care. Silas saw my face. He reached for his weapon in the glove box. "Miss Sterling?" "Call the jet, Silas," I said. My voice was ice cold. "We are leaving?" he asked. "No," I said. "We are bringing in reinforcements. I want the private security team from London, the XSS unit, all of them. And tell Arthur to liquidate my positions in tech. I need cash. Liquid cash." "How much?" Silas asked. "$1 billion, I said. As looked at the smoke rising from the diner. "I'm gonna buy this entire city, every building, every road, every police station. They want a war? I'm gonna give them a nuclear winter. If you want to see me turn this academic revenge story into a full-blown war against a secret society that runs the city, you need to subscribe. I'm done being a student. Now, I'm the executioner." The sterile smell of the hospital waiting room was suffocating. It smelled like rubbing alcohol and fear. I stood by the window, looking down at the parking lot, watching the rain wash away the blood from my shoes. Old Joe was in the ICU. 3rd-degree burns, smoke inhalation. The doctors said the next 24 hours were critical. He was an old man who just wanted to serve pancakes and tell bad jokes, and they burned him alive to send a message to me. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. They wanted a war. They wanted to see if the 20-year-old girl would run back to her safe, pampered life. They forgot one thing. I didn't get my temper from my mother. I got it from my grandfather, the man who built an empire by crushing his enemies into dust. My phone buzzed. It was Silas. "The package has arrived, Miss Sterling." The airfield. I walked out of the hospital. I didn't say goodbye to Joe. I wasn't going to say goodbye. I was going to bring him the head of the man who lit the match. We drove to a private airstrip on the outskirts of the city. It was midnight. The runway lights were off, but I could see the silhouette of a massive C-130 Hercules transport plane sitting on the tarmac. The ramp was down. Men were marching out. 12 of them. They wore tactical gear, but no insignias, no flags. These weren't soldiers. They were ghosts. the private security unit my family kept on retainer for high-risk asset recovery. They were XSAS, XMI6. They were the people you called when the police couldn't or wouldn't help. The leader walked up to the car. He was a giant of a man named Commander Wolf. He had a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that had seen too much. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice like gravel, "we are operational. What are the rules of engagement?" I stepped out of the car. The wind whipped my hair. "There are no rules, Wolf. They burned a civilian. They threatened a Sterling. I want the city locked down." Wolf nodded. "We have intel on the group. We tracked the digital footprint of the call you received. It bounced through several servers, but we traced the origin. It came from a private server located in the basement of the Pegasus Club." The Pegasus Club?" I asked. "It was an exclusive gentlemen's club in the city center. Members only. Judges, politicians, bank owners. The elite." "That's their hive," Wolf confirmed. "They are meeting tonight, an emergency gathering, likely to discuss you." "Good," I said. "Load up, we're going to crash the party." We drove back into the city, but this wasn't a convoy of limousines. It was a convoy of armored SUVs. As we drove, I sat in the back with my laptop. I had Arthur on the secure line. "Arthur, what is the status of the acquisition?" "It's done," Arthur said. "It was expensive, Madam Chairwoman. We had to pay a 40% premium, but as of 5 minutes ago, Sterling Holdings owns the municipal debt of Cambridge. We own the utility company. We own the mortgage on the police precinct, and we just bought the controlling stake in the bank that finances the Pegasus Club." "So I own their clubhouse?" I asked. "You own the building, the land, and the chairs they sit on," Arthur said. "You can legally evict them whenever you choose." "I don't want to evict them, Arthur. I want to trap them." "Cut the power." "Now?" Arthur asked. "Now," I said. We pulled up to the Pegasus Club. It was a grand Georgian building with stone pillars. Valets were parking Bentleys and Jaguars out front. Suddenly, the lights went out. The streetlights stayed on. The buildings next door stayed on. But the Pegasus Club went pitch black. I saw confusion at the door. The doorman was tapping his earpiece. I opened the car door. Wolf and his team spilled out. They didn't draw weapons yet. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. They moved with a terrifying precision, securing the perimeter, blocking the exits. I walked up the steps. The doorman tried to stop me. "I'm sorry, miss. Power outage." "And this is a members-only." Wolf stepped in front of the doorman. He didn't touch him. He just looked at him. The doorman stepped back, terrified. I pushed the heavy doors open. Inside, it was chaos. Emergency lights bathed the room in a red glow. Old men in tuxedos were shouting at the staff. Waiters were dropping trays. I walked into the center of the main hall. My heels clicked on the parquet floor. Wolf fired a single blank round into the ceiling. Bang! The room went silent. Everyone ducked. All eyes turned to me. I stood in the center of the room, bathed in red light. I looked like a demon. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Sorry about the lights. I haven't paid the bill yet. Or rather, I own the power company, and I decided to disconnect you." A man stepped forward from the shadows. He was tall, silver-haired, with the face of a hawk. I recognized him. It was Sir Reginald Thorne, a powerful magistrate, a man who put people in prison for a living. "Miss Sterling," he boomed, "you have gone too far. This is private property. You are violating." I cut him off. "I bought the property, Reggie, 10 minutes ago. You are trespassing." Thorne faltered. "You bought the club?" "I bought the club," I said, stepping closer. "I bought the bank that holds your mortgage, Reggie. I bought the debt on your country estate. I bought the loans for your son's failing startup. I looked around the room at the other faces. I own you too, Mr. Mayor. I know about the bribes from the construction companies. And you, Chief of Police. I know why your officers were blocking the road while my friend burned. The room rippled with fear. They weren't used to being threatened. They were the ones who did the threatening. We know who you are, Thorne sneered, trying to regain control. You're just a girl with a trust fund. You think money scares us? We are the order. We have run this country since before your grandfather was born. You cannot win. We have leverage. Leverage? I asked. I signaled Wolf. Wolf threw a file onto the table. It slid across and hit Thorne's glass of scotch. Photos spilled out. Photos of Thorne meeting with the arsonist. Photos of the mayor accepting a briefcase of cash. Photos of the chancellor signing illegal visas. My security team is very thorough, I said. We hacked your private server. The one in the basement. We have everything. Every email, every bribe, every threat. Thorne went pale. He looked at the other men. They were backing away from him. The pack was turning on its leader. You burned down my diner, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You hurt an innocent old man? Because you wanted to teach me a lesson? I walked right up to Thorne. I was half his size, but I towered over him. Here is the lesson, Sir Reginald. You don't start a fire unless you know how to control the wind. And right now, a hurricane is blowing. Thorne's hand moved to his jacket pocket. Wolf was there in a flash. He grabbed Thorne's wrist and twisted. A small pistol clattered to the floor. The room gasped. A magistrate carrying a gun. Take him, I said to Wolf. Police zip-tied Thorne's hands behind his back. The rest of you, I announced to the room. You have a choice. You can stay here and go down with him. You can face the police, the press, and the ruin of your families. Or you can resign. All of you. Tonight, you retire, you disappear, and you never, ever cross a Sterling again. The men looked at each other. They looked at Thorne, who was on his knees. One by one, they started to leave. The mayor ran out the back door. The chief of police dropped his badge on the table and walked out. Within minutes, the room was empty. Only Thorne remained. He looked up at me. His eyes were full of venom. You haven't won, he spat. There are others. Above me. You have no idea what you've started. I leaned down. Then tell them I'm coming for them too. I turned to Wolf. Hand him over to the authorities. The real authorities. I have FBI agents landing in an hour. They are very interested in his international money laundering. I walked out of the club. The cool night air felt good. My phone rang. It was the hospital. I froze. I was terrified to answer. Miss Sterling? The nurse said. Yes?
He's awake! Joe is awake! He's asking for you!
But I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Tears stung my eyes. I'm coming, I said. I got back into the SUV. Silas looked at me. Is it over, Miss Sterling? I looked at the Pegasus Club, now dark and empty. For tonight, Silas. For tonight. But as we drove away, I knew Thorne was right. He was just a middle manager. There was someone else. Someone who authorized the hit. Someone who didn't care about money. And I had a feeling that the final boss wasn't a man in a suit. It was someone much closer to home. I looked at the file Wolf had recovered from the server. There was one email I hadn't shown Thorne. It was from an anonymous address. Subject, the Sterling girl. Body, let her play her games. When she is distracted, we take the real prize, the trust itself. I stared at the screen. They didn't want the diner. They didn't want the university. They wanted my family's fortune. And they had someone on the inside. If you want to see the shocking finale where I discover the traitor within my own organization and fight for the very survival of the Sterling legacy, you need to subscribe. The war for the city is over. The war for the crown has just begun. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Old Joe looked small in the hospital bed, his face bandaged, tubes running into his arms. I sat beside him, holding his rough, calloused hand. The hand that had flipped 1,000 burgers to put me through school when my father's allowance was tied up in legal battles. He squeezed my hand weakly, his eyes opened. "Ava," he rasped. His voice was like dry leaves.
I'm here, Joe, I whispered. I'm here.
It wasn't just the club, he wheezed. They were looking for something. In the back office. Looking for what? I asked. The cash register? No, Joe coughed. A file. Your grandfather left a file with me years ago for safekeeping. He said never to trust the suits, especially the one with the silver pen. My blood ran cold. The silver pen. There was only one man in the Sterling organization who used a solid silver Mont Blanc pen, a pen he claimed was a gift from my grandfather. Arthur, my lawyer, my confidant, the man who had been guiding me through this entire war. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. Alert! Large transfer initiated. $5 billion. Destination, Zurich. Then another. Alert! Asset liquidation. Sterling Real Estate Holdings. Then another. Alert! Account frozen due to suspicious activity. I stood up. The room started to spin. This email I found on the server. When she is distracted, we take the real prize. The war with the university, the fight with the order, the arson. It was all a distraction. Arthur had manipulated me. He had pointed me at Hawthorne, pointed me at Benedict, pointed me at Thorne. He wanted me to use my resources, to liquidate my assets, to buy the city, to create chaos. Why? So the money would be liquid, so he could steal it while I was playing soldier. I looked at Silas, who was standing by the door. "Silas," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Where is Arthur right now?" Silas checked his comms. "He's at the Sterling Tower, Miss Sterling. He said he's finalizing the acquisition paperwork for the city takeover." "He's not finalizing it," I said, grabbing my coat. "He's stealing it." "Silas, get the team. We're going to the office." We drove through the rain-slicked streets like a missile. I watched the notifications on my phone. 10% transferred, 20% transferred. He was draining the trust. Everything my family built, everything I had fought for. If he finished that transfer, I wouldn't just be broke, I would be destitute, and he would disappear into the shadows forever. We pulled up to the Sterling Tower. The lights were on in the penthouse. I didn't wait for Wolf and the team. I ran into the lobby. I used my master key to override the elevator. I watched the floor numbers climb. 40, 50, 60. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I had outsmarted a professor. I had crushed a secret society. But could I defeat the man who knew all my secrets? The elevator doors opened. The penthouse office was silent. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city I had just conquered. Arthur was sitting at my grandfather's desk. He was typing on his laptop. A glass of vintage scotch sat next to him, and there it was, the silver pen, resting on a stack of signed documents. He looked up. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "You're early, Ava," he said calmly. "I expected you to be at the hospital grieving for another hour." "You traitor!" I spat, walking toward the desk. "You set this all up. The failed exam, the leaked info to Benedict, the fire. You wanted me angry. You wanted me distracted." Arthur took a sip of scotch. "Anger is a powerful motivator, Ava, but it makes you blind. While you were busy playing vigilante, buying fuel trucks, and raiding clubs, you gave me exactly what I needed, authorization." He tapped a document. "You gave me power of attorney to liquidate assets for the war effort. Do you remember signing that in the car?" I stopped. I remembered. I was furious about the fire. I told him to get me $1 billion in cash. I signed the digital pad without reading the fine print. "I'm freezing the accounts, Arthur," I said, reaching for the phone on the desk. He smiled. "You can't! The transfer is already in the blockchain. It's encrypted. Once it hits 100%, which will happen in 3 minutes, the money is gone. And so am I. The helicopter is already on the roof." "Why?" I asked, tears stinging my eyes. "You were my father's friend. You raised me after he died." "I was an employee," Arthur shouted, his composure cracking for the first time. "I built this fortune. I managed the investments. I fixed the mistakes. And what did I get? A salary? A pat on the head? While you, a 20-year-old girl who spends her time serving burgers to build character, you get it all? It's not fair, Ava. It's simply not fair." I looked at the laptop screen. Transfer progress, 98%. He stood up. He grabbed his briefcase. "Goodbye, Ava. Don't worry, I left you the house in the Hamptons. You can retire there. Maybe open a real diner." He walked toward the private elevator to the roof. I stood there, helpless. The gun Wolf gave me was in my bag, but I couldn't shoot him. I wasn't a murderer. I watched him press the button for the roof. The doors opened. And standing there was Silas and Wolf and 2 FBI agents. Arthur froze. He dropped his briefcase. "What? How?" he stammered. I smiled. I wiped the tear from my cheek. "You taught me everything I know, Arthur," I said, "including the most important rule of business: always have a backup plan." I walked over to the desk. I turned the laptop around. Transfer failed. Access denied. Arthur's eyes went wide. "No! No! I have the codes. I have your signature." "You have my signature," I said. "But you don't have the biometric key." I held up my phone. When Joe woke up, he told me about the silver pen. He told me, "You were the one to watch." So while we were driving here, I called the bank. The real bank. The Swiss bank my grandfather used. I triggered the dead man switch. It locks the entire trust. Nothing moves in or out without a retinal scan. My retina. Winniestrans. I walked up to him. He looked small now. Just a greedy old man in a suit. "You thought I was distracted, Arthur, but I'm a multitasker. I can mourn my friend and trap a rat at the same time. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful little girl named Sabrina, living happily until one day, an evil witch appeared and changed everything." Arthur looked at me, pleading. "Ava, please, I can fix this. We can share it. I can help you run the empire." "I don't need your help," I said coldly. I leaned in close, and I don't need a lawyer anymore. Eddie, I picked up the silver pen from the desk. I pocketed it. "I think I'll keep this as a reminder." "Take him away," I ordered. They dragged him out. He was screaming, begging, cursing. The elevator doors closed. The room was quiet again. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city lights were twinkling below. I owned it all. The university, the clubs, the banks. But the cost had been high. 6 months later, the Rusty Spoon reopened on a Tuesday. It was bigger now, with new booths and a shiny neon sign, but the menu was the same. I walked in. The bell above the door jingled. Old Joe was behind the counter. He was in a wheelchair, but he was smiling. He was flipping pancakes. "Hey, boss," he called out. "You're late for your shift." I laughed. I was wearing a Chanel suit, but I took off the jacket. I rolled up my silk sleeves. I grabbed an apron from the hook. "Sorry, Joe," I said, tying it around my waist. "I had a board meeting. We're buying a shipping company today." Joe shook his head. "You and your hobbies. Table 4 needs coffee." I grabbed the pot. I walked over to table 4. A group of students was sitting there. They were working on an economics thesis. One of them looked up. It was David, the boy from the lecture. "Ms. Sterling?" he asked, surprised. "What are you doing? You own the university. You don't have to serve coffee. I fill the coffee into his mug. Bait 5 young. I smiled. I know, David, but it keeps me humble. And besides, I looked out the window at my Rolls-Royce parked next to Joe's beat-up van. The best way to watch your empire is from the ground floor. I walked back to the counter. I was Ava Sterling, billionaire, genius, waitress, and nobody was ever going to underestimate me again.